NFL teams always need something. A team like the Chiefs doesn't need much, and a team like the Panthers needs a lot, but everyone needs something. So here's every NFL team's biggest need in 2024. The Kansas City Chiefs need to stop. Please, I'm begging you, just stop. This is pretty similar to what I said about them in last year's biggest needs video. I said they need to relax because they won a Super Bowl in their first year after trading Tyreek Hill. Now that sentiment is like 100 times worse. They felt the effects of not having Tyreek Hill or any other name brand receiver this year way more than last year. All season, Chiefs pass catchers couldn't catch a cold. Even Travis Kelce was having a down year. Then we get to the playoffs and they just win the Super Bowl again. We are dangerously close to the Chiefs being a bigger dynasty than the Patriots were with Tom Brady. And yes, of course that bothers me as a Patriots fan, but for anyone out there hoping that we get an era of a little more parity after Tom Brady left the Patriots, that might not be happening. So yeah, Chiefs, please stop. The Las Vegas Raiders need Luke Getsy to not be a moron. This was the guy who couldn't figure out that running was Justin Fields' biggest strength and that maybe he should play into that. And now he's being tasked with designing an offense for a team with no obvious strengths. Yes, they have Devontae Adams, so we can start with get the ball to him, maybe put it in big bold font at the top of the page. But they just lost Josh Jacobs, we don't know who their quarterback's gonna be, and worst of all, they committed the biggest sin a football team could possibly commit. They signed Alexander Mattison. It's gonna take a lot to convince me that this hire wasn't as big of a mistake as hiring Josh McDaniels was. Oh, who am I kidding? Nothing could be that big of a mistake. The Los Angeles Chargers need Ladd McConkey to be Cooper McCuppy. Before the draft, the Chargers receiver room was desolate. I'm talking emptier than their Super Bowl trophy case. They traded Keenan Allen to the Bears and let Mike Williams go to the Jets in free agency, leaving them with only Quentin Stonehands Johnston and Josh, there's nothing wrong with being average, Palmer. And then they spent their number 5 overall pick on a tackle instead of Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. Now, I don't think taking Joe Alt was a mistake. I mean, the guy's name and overall vibe just scream, I'm gonna be an all-pro for the next 15 years. But Justin Herbert still needs someone to throw to. Lucky for the Chargers, Ladd McConkey fell to their 2nd round pick, and I hope he's up for the challenge of carrying this entire receiving core on his back. If he can do that, maybe the Chargers offense will be in good shape after all. Or they'll just run the ball 40 times a game with Gus Edwards. Either way, the Denver Broncos need to stop overpaying for every quarterback they put on their roster. Russell Wilson's tenure as a Bronco is objectively funny. Year 1, he comes in, creates enough memes to last a lifetime, and plays like trash. Year 2, Sean Payton comes in, tells him to shut up, gets better numbers out of him, but nothing great, and then the Broncos cut him, before the massive extension they signed him to even kicked in. So in hindsight, the Broncos overpaid for Russ arguably more than any team has ever overpaid for anyone. But hey, what's done is done, so what's the Broncos' next move? Oh, it's spending the number 12 overall pick on Bo Nix. Now, I don't think it was a bad idea for the Broncos to bring in Bo Nix. I think it was a bad idea for them to spend such a high pick on him when reportedly no other team had a 1st round grade on him. So after overpaying for Russ, they overpaid for Nix. And I'd argue they overpaid for Zach Wilson by giving up literally anything for him. So 0 for 3. The Buffalo Bills need to stop getting bullied by the Chiefs. I know everyone gets bullied by the Chiefs, but for some reason, it's a lot worse for Buffalo. First of all, the Bills have been eliminated from the playoffs by the Chiefs in 3 of the past 4 seasons. Doesn't matter what round, where the game's played at, the buck always stops with Kansas City. And now, the bullying has apparently extended into the NFL draft. Everyone and their mother knew the Bills needed a receiver coming into this draft, because Diggs finally divoed his way out of Buffalo, while Gabe Davis is gonna go be mid a little further south. And there they were. On the clock at number 28, several great receiver prospects still available, and somehow the Chiefs convinced them, I assume by threatening to shove them in a locker, to trade their pick to them. Kansas City then used that pick to select the fastest receiver in NFL draft history, if you go by 40 time, addressing one of the only weaknesses of the team that Buffalo already can't beat. I know they ended up getting Keon Coleman, but I can't help feeling like this trade was a mistake. Because if Xavier Worthy cooks the Bills in the playoffs and they lose to the Chiefs again, the people of Buffalo may riot. And those folks break stuff when things are going well. The Miami Dolphins need to relocate somewhere colder so they can stop being so soft in the playoffs. The Dolphins offense is built to score on you anytime from anywhere. They're fast, they're skilled, and if you're not careful, they might just score 70 on you. But they do all this from the comfort of sunny Miami, Florida. And when they get to the playoffs in the dog days of January, they freeze up. Literally, that electric offense that's predicated on speed suddenly doesn't work so well when your guys can barely feel their toes. And unless they have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, eventually they're gonna have to go to Baltimore or Buffalo or Kansas City, where they might run into, I don't know, record low temperatures, including a negative 27-degree wind chill. The only way to fix this is to move the Dolphins somewhere cold and toughen them up a bit. Maybe we move them to Alaska and we rename them the Malamutes. The New York Jets, for the love of God, need to get rid of the turf. There is no team in the NFL playing with more fire than the Jets, and they already got burned last year, but they're apparently not gonna change anything. This roster consists of 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers coming off a torn Achilles, Breece Hall, who tore his ACL 2 years ago, and maybe the most injury-riddled wide receiver in the league coming in to be their number 2 target, and they'll be playing half their games on the MetLife Stadium turf. The same turf where in just 4 years, Nick Bosa, Solomon Thomas, Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jabril Peppers, and Kyle Fuller tore their ACLs, Raheem Mostert tore his MCL, and Aaron Rodgers, Sterling Shepard, Blake Martinez, and Al Woods tore their Achilles. It doesn't matter who the Jets sign or draft or trade for if their knee is just going to explode 3 games into the season. Go back to grass, it's not that hard. The New England Patriots need to keep following the Houston Houston Texans blueprint for how to rebuild a franchise. Hire a first-time head coach who used to play linebacker for your franchise? Check. Draft a quarterback with a high pick and hope the team ahead of you made a mistake? Check. Have a blue and red logo with a star in it? Check. All right, I know the Patriots had that one first, but it's still a funny coincidence. It seems like the Patriots are doing a pretty good job following the Texans' lead of how to rebuild a franchise in record time. The only thing they didn't do was make a huge trade and draft a core defensive player in the same class as the quarterback, but it seems like they got their defensive player last year, and it'll kind of feel like his rookie year anyway since he only played 4 games before getting hurt. Hopefully things work out for the Patriots as well as they did for the Texans, because quite frankly, it's been too long since we've seen the Patriots dominate the AFC. Us fans have suffered long enough. The Baltimore Ravens need something to remind them to run the ball when it matters. Maybe a string on their finger or a reminder on their phone, something. Because watching them play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game this year was painful. The #1 rushing offense in the NFL in both yards and attempts gave their running backs 6 carries the entire game and only 2 in the second half. Now I'm hoping with Derrick Henry in the mix, this is less likely to happen again, because instead of Justice Hill or Gus Edwards being like, hey, remember us, the running backs? Yeah, we're here. No one is going to forget about Derrick Henry in the first place. It's kind of hard to when he's a tractor trailer and cleats. But look, I don't care what method Baltimore uses to remember to run the ball as long as they do something, because they're one of the few teams in the AFC that's actually capable of knocking off the Chiefs. But not if they're going to forget what got them that far to begin with. The Cleveland Browns need Deshaun Watson to stop stinking. Big ol' stinker. Creepy stinker, too. I basically said the same thing last year about what the Browns need, and they still need it, which is probably not a good sign. Here's the thing. The Browns were successful with Deshaun last year. They were 4-1 in games he started. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you the revolving door of Browns quarterbacks last year were better than Deshaun, because they weren't. The problem is Deshaun is tying up $63 million a year on the salary cap, and he wasn't that much better than the revolving door of quarterbacks the Browns started last year, especially Joe Flacco. If that continues to be the case, the Browns are just going to wish they had that $63 million available to improve the rest of their roster around a good but not great quarterback, like Joe Flacco or someone else. Having Deshaun be a good but not great quarterback while not having money to spend elsewhere is a tough pill to swallow. Deshaun will probably never be a top 5 quarterback again, but the Browns need him to at least find his way inside that top 10. Otherwise, their ceiling is going to be hard capped. For Cleveland fans, I'm sure just consistently being in the playoffs is nice, but eventually those first round exits are going to start to hurt. The Pittsburgh Steelers need a shot collar for Arthur Smith, just to keep him in line. The Steelers brought in the fantasy football terrorist himself to run their offense, but honestly, I don't think it's a terrible move. He has a proven track record as a successful offensive coordinator in Tennessee, and at the end of the day, some guys just aren't built to be head coaches. I mean, we've seen that with Josh McDaniels time and time again. Every time he gets a head coaching gig, he fails spectacularly, but every time he's the OC in New England, he's one of the best in the game. So maybe Art's just better suited to be a coordinator. Plus, he can't be any worse than Matt Canada. But with all that said, you still need to keep an eye on. If the game plan on a given week is a little too heavy on the Van Jefferson usage, or there's a few too many carries in there for Aaron Shamplin, it might be a sign that Artie's hearing the voices again. And he might just need a little zap to remind him that's a no-no. The Cincinnati Bengals need Joe Burrow to play more video games, aka the opposite of the Cardinals' problem with Kyler Murray. The Bengals lost Joe Burrow to a wrist injury last year, burning one of their prime years of championship contention and an opportunity to knock off the Chiefs. Side note, if you're noticing a theme here of me wanting someone to knock off the Chiefs, you're right. Those guys. But back to the Bengals. This isn't the first time Burrow's had a wrist injury. He fractured his wrist back in 2017 at Ohio State. Now, I believe if he plays more video games, he'll build up a little more strength in those wrists, be a little more dexterous. So let's get Joey B some reps in Urzikstan, or maybe drop off the battle bus for old time's sake. Honestly, I don't care if he plays Bloons Tower Defense. Just do something to prevent these injuries so we can stop the Chiefs from winning every year. The Houston Texans need to not get whiplash from how quickly they turned around. I said it before when I talked about the Patriots needing their blueprint, but seriously, no one expected the Texans to go from bottom of the barrel to legitimate Super Bowl contender in just one season. But when you have such a quick turnaround, there's always a chance that you come back down to earth. Now, this is not an indictment on CJ Stroud or D'Amico Ryans or Tank Dell or Will Anderson. I have no reason to believe those guys will suddenly be bad just because they were good last year. But if you're a believer in the sophomore slump, literally all of those guys are sophomores, including D'Amico Ryans as head coach. I'm a firm believer in the Texans. I don't think we're going to see some massive fall off. Houston just has to make sure they're ready for how different things are going to be in year 2. Other teams won't be taking them lightly anymore. They are fully aware of how dangerous this Texans team can be. So we'll see how Houston adjusts to having that target on their back. The Jacksonville Jaguars need an elevator to help Trevor Lawrence finally reach that next level, because apparently he's not going to do it himself. I've been waiting for Trevor to make the leap for years, and he just hasn't done it. I thought Calvin Ridley was going to be the missing piece. I figured with him joining Christian Kirk, Evan Engram, and Travis Etienne, forming one of the best skill groups in the league, it would all finally come together. Instead, Trevor took that skill group and turned it into just 21 touchdowns and 14 interceptions over 16 games. And now, the Jags replaced Calvin Ridley with Gabe Davis, and while Ridley wasn't exactly a game breaker in Jacksonville, Davis is not an upgrade. Maybe bringing in Mac Jones will light a fire under Trevor, I don't know. If not, it might be time to find that elevator so we can get him to the next level through brute force. Does anyone know any elevator companies? I don't think I've heard of a single elevator company in my entire life. Do those things just spawn in? That'd make this a lot more complicated. The Indianapolis Colts need Anthony Richardson to stop being the Jeff Hardy of the NFL. Brother, Value your health. Richardson has all the potential in the world, but he's never gonna reach it if he keeps throwing his body around like a crash test dummy. I know it's a tough thing to balance. We talk about it with every mobile quarterback. You want to protect him while not taking away the thing that makes him special. But there is a way to do it. We've seen it with guys like Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, who have figured out how to run at an effective level while minimizing injuries, at least serious ones. I think Richardson got hit with a heavy dose of reality when it comes to this, considering he suffered multiple major injuries, including a season ender in just 4 games as a pro. So hopefully he learns from this, because when he's on the field, he's maybe the most fun quarterback to watch in the entire league, and I don't want to see him turn into RG4. The Tennessee Titans need Will Levis to be good. Like, they really need him to be good. The Titans are contending. Apparently. They signed Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, Lloyd Cushenberry, Chidobe Awuzie, and traded for L'Jarius Sneed. That is an aggressive offseason for a team that I figured was just going to tread water for another year until they figured out what they had in Will Levis. Instead, they're treating him like he's CJ Stroud. Texans went out and got Diggs and Mixon, Titans went out and got Ridley and Pollard. They're acting like Levis is a franchise guy, so they need him to actually be a franchise guy. And I'm skeptical, because we definitely saw some flashes last season, but nothing that made you think he's a slam dunk quarterback of the future. Plus, he put mayonnaise in his coffee that one time, and no, I will never get over it. Before we move on to the NFC, do me a favor if you're enjoying the video, click that like button, click that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and if you're really feeling frisky, click that little bell so you never miss an upload. Every single one of those steps helps me out a lot, so if you guys are enjoying this video and you want to see more content like this, make sure you click on all the stuff. Thank you, love you, let's keep going. The Dallas Cowboys need to give a So the Cowboys just had maybe their most demoralizing playoff exit in recent memory, which is saying a lot because they've had quite a few demoralizing exits. But this time their defense completely collapsed and the team essentially got bullied out of their own building. So how would you expect a team to respond after such an embarrassing loss? You'd expect them to hit free agency pretty hard and shake things up a bit, right? Nope. Instead, they watched Tony Pollard, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz, and Tyron Smith all walk away while spending basically $0 themselves. I'm sorry, actually that's not true. They signed Royce Freeman. Dallas has done nothing to improve after last year's playoff collapse, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised. The Cowboys are more of a brand than an actual football team at this point, and it's been that way for 30 years. The Philadelphia Eagles need some paper so they can expand the goal line section of their playbook to have more than one play. Last season, once the Eagles got to the goal line, you knew what was coming. The tush push was a diabolically effective play, to the point where some people actually wanted it banned. And even though it wasn't banned, the Eagles probably won't be able to run it as effectively anymore anyway, because the centerpiece of it retired. So Philly might have to broaden their horizons a bit. Maybe drop some normal QB sneaks, mix in some passes here and there, and maybe, just maybe, actually hand the ball off to a running back. Just kidding, we all know Jalen Hurts isn't doing that. The New York Giants need a reality check that Daniel Jones is not that guy. Ideally, one of those comically large checks to really drive the point home. You know how sometimes you can tell a team is about to waste an entire season because they just refuse to admit that what they're doing isn't working? It's how I felt about the Raiders last year going into another season with Josh McDaniels as their head coach, and it's how I feel about the Giants sticking with Daniel Jones for another year. They signed him to a $160 million deal after a year where he only threw for 15 touchdowns, essentially banking on the idea that he would improve. And then in the 6 games before he got hurt last year, he threw for 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. The Giants were hoping he'd make the leap, and instead he fell into the abyss. And if they don't accept their mistake soon, they're just gonna fall in with them. The Washington Commanders need their new ownership to actually be an improvement. Now I wanna make something clear. Their new ownership is already a major improvement from a being a human perspective, because Dan Snyder was a certified piece of garbage. But for the sake of this video, I'm talking about actual football and team building. I was optimistic when Josh Harris bought the Commanders, but so far, I'm not sure the on-field product is gonna be any different. He brought in Bob Myers, the former Warriors GM, and Rick Spielman, the former Vikings GM, to help find a new head coach, along with Magic Johnson, who was already part of Harris's ownership group. So you've got a lot of cooks in this kitchen, and several of them have a background primarily in basketball, not football, something that even Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson found odd when he was interviewing with them. And then they end up settling on Dan Quinn, the most underwhelming head coach they could have possibly hired. It's just bad vibes in Washington. Again, the Detroit Lions need a chiropractor because someone needs to fix their backs. Their defensive backs, that is. Their other backs are fine. A lot of people expected the Lions to take a big step forward last year, and not only did they do exactly that, they actually exceeded expectations, making it all the way to the NFC Championship game. But they still had one glaring weakness. Their pass defense was hot garbage, allowing the 6th most passing yards in the NFL. Credit to Detroit, they've made some moves to address their shortcomings, take notes Cowboys, by trading for Carlton Davis, signing Amik Robertson in free agency, and spending their first 2 picks in the draft on corners. If the Lions can shore up their secondary, opposing teams are going to have a tough time moving the ball on them at all, considering they already had one of the best run defenses in the league and then decided to make it overkill by adding DJ Reader. If you need a laxative, just look at the Lions D-line because they're going to be making offensive players poop their pants all season. The Green Bay Packers need Jordan Love to be more Aaron Rodgers than Brett Favre. The Packers seem to have found their 3rd straight elite quarterback, which 1 is annoying, but 2, his play style is disturbingly similar to Aaron Rodgers. You can tell Love was just a sponge while he sat behind Rodgers for 3 years. But unfortunately, the Packers season came to an end because Love made a very Favre-ish decision, throwing across his body to the middle of the field, ending Green Bay's comeback attempt against the 49ers before it really got started. Rodgers has always been known for his great decision making. On the field, that that is. But this play in the biggest moment of the season was not reminiscent of Rodgers at all. If Love can just clean up the mistakes like that and continue looking like a Rodgers clone otherwise, the Packers are going to be a problem for years to come. Hopefully he has a different role model for off-the-field behavior though. Maybe Andrew Luck or something, he just minds his own business. The Minnesota Vikings need to hope Justin Jefferson falls victim to Stockholm Syndrome, because that might be the only way he doesn't leave Minnesota. We've already seen some frustration out of Jefferson during his time with the Vikings, not for lack of targets because he gets plenty, but for lack of winning. And if he was already frustrated while playing with a certifiably above average quarterback like Kirk Cousins, I can't imagine how he's going to feel playing with a rookie quarterback or, God forbid, Sam Darnold. Minnesota still hasn't signed Jefferson to an extension, and with how bleak the Vikings outlook is getting, the only way he's going to stick around is if he gets Stockholm Syndrome and convinces himself the situation isn't a complete dumpster fire. The Chicago Bears need to learn some meditation and breathing techniques because dealing with Caleb Williams is going to be stressful. Don't get me wrong, I fully support drafting Caleb Williams and think it's the right move. It's just not going to come without its challenges. First off, Caleb himself is a handful because the biggest criticism of him, other than having a pink phone case apparently, is his fumbling. The guy just doesn't protect the ball, and that's bound to be mind-numbing for the coaching staff. They'll work with him to get through it, but the growing pains are going to suck. And then you've got Caleb's dad, Carl, who's made a few headlines throughout the draft process, including trying to get Caleb an ownership stake in whatever team drafts him, and trying to find a way around Caleb having to sign a standard rookie contract. You know, 4 years, 5th-year option, the one everyone has to sign. Drafting a quarterback with the #1 overall pick always comes with plenty of media attention. But Caleb might be bringing a little extra with him to Chicago. So the Bears need to make sure they found their inner peace before they try to deal with it. Deep breaths. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers need Kirk Cousins to actually look like a 36-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. The Bucs have won the NFC South for 3 years straight, but now that the Falcons have the king of Coles cash under center, they're the new favorites to win the division. Which makes sense, their roster's really strong top to bottom, and now they finally have their quarterback. That's why the Bucs' best chance to win the division again is for Atlanta to actually not have their quarterback. They need Kirk to not look like Kirk. And I do think the hype of the Falcons finally getting a decent quarterback has overshadowed the fact that we are talking about an old quarterback coming off a major injury. If Atlanta gets the Kirk that we've seen for the last several years, along with some competent coaching for once, the Falcons should cruise to a division title. But if age and injury take their toll and they get anything less, the Bucs might keep their stranglehold on the South for another year. The New Orleans Saints need a financial advisor. The Saints are in salary cap hell. You know how Blockbuster refused to buy Netflix when they had the chance, and now they're down to just one sad little store in Bend, Oregon, while Netflix runs the world? Yeah, the Saints basically made a bunch of bad financial decisions like that in a row. They just kept pushing money into the future, paying the wrong guys, and now they're stuck with a bunch of mediocre players and no cap space to surround them with less mediocre players. I mean, hell, 13% of their cap is occupied by Michael Thomas, Andres Pete, and Marcus May, who aren't on the team anymore. They're gonna be stuck in limbo for a little while. Maybe they can go on Shark Tank and ask for more money. Hi Sharks, we're asking for $300 million in exchange for us drawing up more silly plays for Taysom Hill. The Atlanta Falcons need new locks, so Arthur Smith can never get back into their facility. It took way too long, but the Falcons finally got rid of their condescending albatross of a head coach. Now, I don't know how great Raheem Morris is going to be. In fact, I'm on record saying I'm not too psyched about the hire, but anything's better than the guy who seemed like he was trying to actively sabotage his own team half the time. Bijan Robinson in the red zone? Nah, feed Michael Pruitt. More targets for Kyle Pitts? Nah, Kadero Hodge jet sweep. Raheem Morris could basically be an NPC. If he just keeps things simple and gives the ball to their best players, the Falcons should be fine. That's why they need to make sure the locks are changed and Arthur Smith can't get back in. Otherwise, he might switch out the playbooks while no one's looking, and next thing you know, they're running the Wildcat with Tucker Fisk. The Carolina Panthers need Dave Canales to really be the quarterback whisperer, like a football version of Cesar Millan. Canales was a major piece in the resurgence of both Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, and now he has probably his biggest challenge yet, the tall task of jumpstarting the career of his not-so-tall quarterback. Everything went wrong for the Panthers last year, so turning this franchise around isn't going to be a quick fix. But if they can start by getting the most out of their first overall quarterback to the point where it doesn't look completely insane that they took him over CJ Stroud, that would help a lot. We'll see if Canales has any special techniques like the dog whisperer does to get Bryce Young to stop pooping in the house. Throwing too many picks. Or will Bryce Young just be another name on the long list of Alabama quarterbacks to not actually be difference makers in the NFL? Hey, how'd that picture of Tua get in there? The San Francisco 49ers need Adderall, because one of the symptoms of ADHD is finding it incredibly difficult to finish tasks, and the 49ers have been unable to finish their task for a few years now. They've been stupidly consistent for the last 5 seasons. You could even argue hyper-focused, making it to at least the NFC Championship game 4 times. And the only year they didn't was in 2020 when Jimmy G got hurt and they had to start Nick Mullins for half the season. But despite fielding one of the best defenses every year along with an offense so dynamic that it's inspired not only other football teams, but also the NCAA basketball champion UConn Huskies, according to head coach Dan Hurley, they can't get over the hump. 2 Super Bowl losses in the past 5 years, both to the Chiefs. And if you want to go back even further, they lost another Super Bowl to the Ravens back in 2012. The Niners enter every year as one of the championship favorites, but it's starting to look like they can't finish the job without some kind of prescription. So let's try Adderall. And if that doesn't work, maybe a new head coach who doesn't collapse in big moments. The Los Angeles Rams need large doses of gamma radiation so they can create a new Aaron Donald. I can only assume the original Aaron Donald was created the same way the Hulk was, so the Rams are going to need to run that back if they want to be real contenders this season. Donald is arguably the best defensive player of this generation, and him retiring is going to change their entire identity on defense, considering it used to be let Aaron Donald occupy 2, sometimes 3 offensive linemen and let everyone else go to work. The Rams were already expected to decline last year, and it was only because of Matthew Stafford's resurgence and the out-of-nowhere emergence of Puka Nacua and Kyren Williams that they stayed solid. And hey, if they found those guys, maybe they can find a new generational 8-time All-Pro, 10-time Pro Bowl, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in the draft somewhere. Probably not, though. Apparently black holes have a lot of gamma radiation, so if the Rams are smart, they'll just throw Kobe Turner into one and hope for the best. The Seattle Seahawks need Mike Macdonald to be a defensive wizard on the same tier that Dumbledore was a regular wizard. I mentioned in my best and worst coaching hires video that Mike Macdonald was a super logical chess match type hire for the Seahawks considering they're in the NFC West. Got 2 of the best offensive minds in the game in your division? Bring in one of the best defensive minds and see if he can slow him down. That's why Seattle needs Macdonald to actually work out that way. They need him to be the guy that led the 2023 Ravens defense to be one of the scariest units in football, and for that leadership to translate to his new role as a head coach, which we know isn't always a guarantee. Otherwise, Shanahan and McVay are just going to keep running circles around him. So let's hope Macdonald is the defensive wizard Seattle fans want him to be. Expecto Patronum. Or whatever. The Arizona Cardinals need to maintain that fire in their gut. You guys remember that meeting Jonathan Gannon had with his players last year?
Who drove over here? Let me see your hands. Who took the bus? Did you have fire in your gut? Did you?
I'll be honest, after seeing that and considering the guy actually looks like Murr from Impractical Jokers, I thought the Cardinals were cooked. I thought this hire was gonna blow up in their face and he was just gonna go down as another coordinator who couldn't make the jump to head coach. But I think I was wrong. Yes, the Cardinals only finished 4-13, but they were without Kyler for half the year and they showed some real fight, with 2 of their wins coming against the Cowboys and the Eagles. Maybe Gannon's getting through to this team after all, and with a fully recovered Kyler and a decent draft, they could be better than people expect in 2024. Side note, I really like Trey McBride. He seems like a serial killer and I dig that. So there you have it, every team's biggest need in 2024. Let me know in the comments what you think your favorite team needs and if I missed anything in this video. And once again, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.